we're here getting started on week 2. This week, we're going to talk about using the LeanScaper business self-assessment to actually create the SMART goals in the business to align everybody on the leadership team and everybody in the company to some common goals to drive continuous improvement deep into the organization. So thank you all for joining. This week, Mike and I are live together. Thankfully, we actually have had some time to spend in person this week. So we're live together. We'll roll through this together. As always, we want to make it as conversational as possible. So we'll try to moderate the questions and kind of take turns checking out the chat and bringing some of those up as we go here. But yeah, we'll go ahead and kick things off. And Mike, why don't you take it from here?
So we're going to start with the self-assessment this week, which is really like a diagnostic tool that you're going to run yourself to help identify what your areas of strengths and weaknesses or health or problems are in your business. And it's really important to start here. Lots of people commonly jump to the biggest pain point that happened very recently, and that's our problem, and we got to stop here. The self-assessment is about a couple of things. And one, it's about taking a breath, a pause, and really taking the time to accurately diagnose what's truly holding up progress or profitability or revenue growth in your business. And then the other side of that too is getting people involved. And that's the part that we really don't want to skip over. It's great for you to take a breath and think about it. Lots of people do this on vacations. I remember Mark's vacations for me used to be an interesting time. It was when I actually got the most emails from Mark as he reflected and dumped on an email full of ideas for us to go execute the following month. And that's good, right? That is that time. And that's what we're talking about, pausing and reflecting on the business and taking that time to do that. But the other part that's really important is gathering some people together and doing that collaboratively. When we had the business, or Mark had his business, it used to be Mark and his brother and myself at 5 o'clock in the morning in the shop and talking about the day-to-day challenges with the jobs, the bigger challenges with the delivery trucks and the fill and all that stuff. But as we evolved our meetings over time, those became company meetings. And then all of a sudden, all kinds of different problems that were actually bigger than the ones we were talking about started to surface. We got more people involved. Crews got their say. We had to learn firsthand what was really impacting the crews. Really started identifying some, I think, stuff that was pretty low-hanging fruit, but had a big impact on the stuff. They weren't massive problems to solve often. They were very tactical, easy to solve problems that we just had blind spots for. So that's the other part we really want to focus on, the self-assessment. When you do this, strongly encourage you to take some time to do this, create some meetings around it, and bring in a group of people that can contribute to this. It'll be good with you. It'll be great the more people you bring in. And then what we're going to do is identify some gaps and opportunities across some key areas. We'll get to that in a second. We're going to go through the details. We're going to go through the form. You're going to get all that in this webinar. And then from there, now everybody's kind of aligned on the problems. They're going to be aligned on the goals that are going to be created as part of those problems. And from there, we can drive better accountability across the organization.
Great. Okay, so we've talked about these business objectives quite a bit in the free community, but ultimately, and maybe you've been to one of the mastermind sessions that we've been holding over the past year. Basically, the way we like to look at the business objectives for a landscape company is that there's 5 key pillars that we want to be focused on. And so these become the LeanScaper business objectives. Now, what we're trying to do here is ultimately focus on repairing or improving all 5 areas of the business as things break when the business is scaling. And when I say repairing, it's because, sometimes a system's working just fine and we start to ignore it and it needs a repair. And then other times we've just outscaled the way that we do things and we outright break it and we need to replace it with a new system. So just like trucks or cars or skid steers or anything, sometimes things just wear out and sometimes they just need a little maintenance. And so we're going to always be looking at the business using this lens of these 5 business objectives so that as a group, you and your leadership team and really everybody in the business who form your company. I like to think of landscaping as a business and your people as a company. Now, as we really work through these 5 objectives, what we're trying to do is raise everybody's level of awareness in the business so that the whole company can really optimize in all areas. So we want to focus on growing revenue and profit. We want to focus on growing people and skills. We want to always be focused on doing all of this as efficiently as possible with the customer in mind. And so customer experience has to be right there at the forefront. And, as a result, I think, of being really great at doing all of these things, we end up being the best brand in the market. And so we've really categorized these 5 pillars and created this LeanScaper framework just to clarify the importance of each area in the business, because all of us, and I can certainly say that I have been a victim of my own mindset over the years, we kind of hyper fixate on the thing that's right in front of us. And so if cash flow is tight, we're focused on growing revenue and profit. Once that's kind of resolved, then what happens is we usually end up short on people. And when we're short on people, then we end up hiring people very quickly and we put them to work. And then we end up having massive operational efficiency problems that tend to actually end up impacting revenue and profit. So then we're back there. And then, inevitably, when we hire people quickly and we don't train them and we don't systemize the business, our customers feel the pain. And I think as a result, we never really fully optimize the business to the point where we get to be the best brand in the market. And so we all feel these tensions because we kind of move as we see problems, and we're not really always focused on all of the things that are going to move the needle. So what we want to do is elevate the business by focusing on all 5 areas at once and always being aware of the metrics so that we're not really just kind of reacting to our emotional responses to problems that are in front of us, but rather like being a lot more rational and just saying, hey, here's the way the numbers are looking. The business is healthy in all of these areas, or maybe it's not so healthy in one or the other. And so the balanced scorecard approach that we're teaching with LeanScaper helps you understand exactly where there's things to fix within each of these 5 categories. Mike, why don't you go ahead and explain the self-assessment form?
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to pull up the self-assessment form and we're going to go through each one and give you some ideas, some talking points, some discussions. But the self-assessment form is basically broken into 5 pillars that align with the balanced scorecard that we talk about. There's financial, there's people, there's operational efficiency or lean. And we're going to go through some subpoints of that. Those subpoints are intended to create discussion. Maybe even before that, though, recommend that you take your assessment and you give it to some people in your organization for them to do on their own so that we don't get a biased opinion. Lots of times when you're in the room with a strong personality, especially at a CEO level, the answers are going to tend to gravitate to whatever that CEO just introduced or discussed as their opinion. So what we're suggesting is also take it outside the company for individuals to do on their own. Then, not outside the company necessarily, but for your employees. Then come back and collaborate on those answers and see where you have alignment and see where maybe things don't have alignment. And then those are fantastic discussions. And just to talk about one more thing here as well, you talked a lot about growing entrepreneurs, and certainly like from you running the business, our foreman ended up running jobs and doing most of my job all day, but then ended up, taking care of the company. How valuable is this kind of thinking and discussions in evolving leaders that might not pay dividends, will pay dividends immediately, but certainly are going to pay 2x, 3x the dividends in the long term in terms of turning them into business owners and thinking about that?
Yeah, I think when you start getting more people involved in assessments like this, whether it be using a business assessment form like this one, or some of the things we're going to teach in some of the upcoming series, skills gap analysis, SWOT analysis, really engaging everybody in the company from top to bottom. What's happening is you're getting the perspective of everybody in the company, which often we overlook. We're all emotional creatures and we tend to focus on the things that are frustrating us. And when we don't actually gather more input from more people, we're not really seeing the frustrations of everybody else. And the true flow interruptions in the business frustrate everybody. And I think one of the most incredible things that I noticed about Lean was when I first started doing continuous improvement meetings and asking everybody to identify the waste, I thought that I kind of had a handle on where the waste was in my business. But the truth is everybody else had a much better perspective than I had, because they were experiencing the flow interruptions and the waste every single day. And I started to think mistakenly that I was the only one who cared. But the truth was everybody else cared. They just thought that as a leader, it wasn't important enough to me to fix. And so that there became the culture. The way it is the way the leader makes it. And if the way it is in a company suggests to the employees that, hey, this is just how we do things here, it might not really be most efficient, but the owner seems to be okay with it, then that is the way it is. And so inefficiency becomes the culture. Where when I started asking for input and help to identify waste, what I noticed right away was most of the waste was a result of the limitations of my leadership and my ability to actually see where all of the waste was in the business. And so when I started asking for help, I had all the help I could get, because people really, I think they go home each night and they complain about these wastes in most companies, and they talk to their friends and their coworkers and they complain about it, but they don't say it to the leader because they're afraid to. And they're afraid to because you don't create the opportunity for them to do so. And so I can't stress enough how much impact shared assessments had on my business and have on my business to this day. Whether it's asking for feedback from customers, employees, all types of different assessments always give you a more rational list of things to focus on, rather than just reacting to the one thing that you're frustrated with. So as we kind of flip through this assessment, I can't stress enough the importance of getting more people involved. At the minimum, we want the whole leadership team to be involved in this. And when I say leadership team, in most landscape companies, that should include the field crew supervisors, even the right-hand person that might be working with them. Definitely anybody that's a manager or a director or a leader of others. And I think when we try to get more input, we get better results. And what we're really trying to do here is figure out where we're really doing well, so that we maybe let off the gas a little bit on trying to fix that and start to focus on things that really truly need improvement in the business. Because all of us humans are the same. We tend to over fixate on things that are either super frustrating or things we're good at. And so we just keep getting better and better at certain things, when really the limiting factor is the thing that we're less likely to want to work on. And as business owners, I can say firsthand, it's very easy to kind of be the procrastinator on the stuff that you don't like doing, because there's nobody always holding you accountable. And I think these assessment forms force that accountability into the whole organization, and the leader then is forced to be the leader of leaders, the leader that they need to be in order to really evolve the business and sort of take the limitations off of the growth levers that exist in every business. And so what we're trying to do here is prioritize improvements as a result. So once we go through the form and we score ourselves, the areas where there's most room for improvement, we want to actually double down there and focus on creating some key initiatives or some improvements that can turn into SMART goals. And Mike, why don't you kind of take it from here?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to paraphrase that also from the staff level. So if you're not a leader and you're on this, but you do, if a culture of helplessness resonates with you at all, like you're looking for answers for action, whatever, and the answers you always get are, it's not my fault, I asked for this, that, those are the people you should probably have in this meeting, because that's the culture that I think transforms. That's what I noticed the most about our company was a very much, well, that's just the way it is and we're helpless to fix it, to people coming in an hour early in the morning, 2 hours early, and reorganizing our parking lot so that staff could park more efficiently and trucks could get out of the yard more efficiently. I remember the idea, and I remember Mark saying, yeah, just come in early, go do it. Put lines up, cones up, we did it. And then sort of Mark's up. Now we got other people doing things that maybe Mark's not wasted his time figuring out parking, but it made a difference every single day in the yard. So if that resonates with you at all, the people around me just aren't engaged or accountable, it's more helpless. These are the people you want to do here. And I think that is going to pay big time dividends. So as we go through this, we're going to go through now the Lean Assessment Form. We're going to look at it. You're going to complete that form. We're going to rank those categories, just what you looked at. And then there's a few things we can do with that as well. So it's going to unlock a bunch of great discussions for yourself. If you've got great discussions, but then are like, okay, now what? What are the best strategies to do? There's going to be a couple of resources for you for sure. A, there's all kinds of discussion in the community. And B, we're going to be doing webinars that are going to pick and choose off some of these topics, expand on them more, and give you lots of ideas. But you've also got help right now to help action that. So the LeanScaper Mastermind Accelerator program is designed to walk you through this every single week. And that's what we're doing here. And that's what these webinars are going to be about. Taking these step by step by step as a group, not just yourself, building collaborative communication between everybody who's on the call in order to make these things actually a reality. And if you're looking for more one-on-one help, you've got an assessment that you're looking for advice on, answers on, we don't really have a pricing strategy, great, reach out to our guides. Our guides are there to do exactly that. And that might be to help you ask better questions, point you to resources in the community, or that may even to help point you to resources like business advisors. So we've got some partnerships with business advisors. It could be a fractional CFO. It could be an HR consultant. It could be somebody to help with budgeting and pricing. But there are lots of those resources out there that are a lot more affordable to take on an as needed basis than trying to maybe hire somebody full time to run that in your company as well. So we're here to help transform those assessments or that assessment into something that's actionable and to give you advice and reference points on where you can actually do that to make those action items actually manifest themselves. One of the first steps, and this shouldn't be done until after. So we're going to do this after we do the assessments. Like we said, hand out the assessment originally, then have people fill them out independently, come back together as a group, and now you've got these unique assessments that you can start discussing, debating, and then creating hopefully one master document of collectively what you think your strengths and weaknesses are. Then what I want to do is introduce for some of you, or just double down for others, new technology that you can use to make this really effective. So we're going to talk about using ChatGPT now. If you haven't used ChatGPT, it couldn't be easier. You're going to set yourself up with an account with an email. And once you log in, you're going to get a text box just like a chat window. And you just need to ask it a question. That's all. If you can type a text message, you can figure this out. For those of you that use ChatGPT, this will be old hat. But the nuance is in the prompts, right? The better prompts we give something like ChatGPT, the better answers we're going to get out of it. So what we want to do now is take our self-assessment. We want to take those low-scoring sections, the things that we're most concerned about. So whether it's your revenue, whether it's your people, etc. Take the items, and we'll go through the assessment in a minute, that stood out the most. And then we're going to create a prompt in ChatGPT that's going to help create organizational goals around solving those challenges. And so right in this slide deck, you're going to see here on step 2, a prompt that you can use that'll actually leverage a bunch of Mark's writing and knowledge and YouTube that he's put out over the time to help you create really good, specific, measurable, time-bound goals to help change those factors that are limiting our growth in certain areas of the business. And so in that step 2, you'll see there, based on these areas of improvement, and you're going to list the areas that were surfaced in your assessment, you want to have it create specific, measurable, assigned, time-bound goals to address these challenges, as Mark Bradley would suggest, using the LeanScaper operating methods. And then, I don't know, prepare to be a little bit amazed, especially if you haven't used it before, on what it spits out. It's pretty awesome. Then you take those goals review them, of course, make sure they look good, refine them as necessary. But then those SMART goals become the landing points for discussion for all things moving forward. So now collaboratively, we review those SMART goals. We assign, just by the very nature of them, they're assigned to people. We've got very specific targets. Now, all of a sudden, everybody is accountable to the things that we've all agreed upon are the biggest factors in holding up our business. And we actually have actionable, measurable ways to see if we're getting better or not. And that's really the magic to all this. And so now you've got a bunch of people that collectively agreed upon the problems, that got some assistance in creating goals that are going to solve those problems. And now we can go to work every day knowing whether we're doing a good job of that because we've got measurements that are going to help us. So that then becomes the discussion point of every meetings, and everybody's been involved. So it starts to become cultural. You talked about it earlier.
Yeah, I think one thing I really experienced throughout my whole career was the challenge of getting goal setting right. And I think when you really start by creating a business assessment like this, and you involve everybody in the leadership positions, and also take into consideration results from SWOT analysis and skills gap analysis, which we'll talk about in some coming weeks. When you take the results and you use all of that information to build your SMART goals, and then you assign those SMART goals, as Mike suggested, everybody was part of the goal setting process, but you're now working on things that everybody in the company has identified as areas of opportunity. And so the goals, not only are the goals better, but the goals are a lot more relevant to the people that you're assigning those goals to. Where I think, many business owners, me included, will set out and say, hey, we want to go from 1 million to 2 million, or I want to go from 3 to 4 million this year, whatever it happens to be. That's not a really relevant goal for most people. And it's so high level that they don't really understand how to actually contribute to that goal. And what we're trying to do with the LeanScaper operating system is create real relevant goals at every area of the business with relatable metrics that people can manage their business to. And that's the balanced scorecard. And so these goals that we're going to create as a result of this business assessment and collaboratively going through the business assessment really do create the framework for a continuous improvement program like LeanScaper. So with that, we're going to go through the form here, and then we're going to have some open discussion, take some questions. We're going to try to leave enough time to do that. So we'll go through this form a little bit, and we're just going to shed a little bit of light on how to use the form, and really, I think, have a little deeper thought-provoking conversation in each category, so that as you present it to your teams, or as you go through this assessment, you take a little bit more of a thoughtful approach, and slow is fast. I don't think this is something you rush through and just simply score yourself. I think slow is fast here. We're really going to slow down this process of going through an assessment and creating the supporting improvement lists so that we get really meaningful goals. And again, what we're trying to do is get away from hyperfixating on one part of the business or the other, or not putting enough attention into continuous improvement in all 5 areas of the business to ensure that we're really actually getting better. So, starting out with growing revenue and profit, over the years, I can say, and I'm sure, Mike, you've found the same, we've taught thousands and thousands of budgeting workshops. And we did that really to help businesses understand how to grow profit and how to scale the operation mathematically using a budget to really get a good outcome. And I think over the years, teaching as much as we did, one thing Mike and I often would talk about afterward is the fact that there was a lot of missing information when creating a budget. And I think a lot of logic around how to increase revenue that was missing. So we would always say, well, just increase the revenue if the expenses were too high. And that would almost scare the daylights out of a lot of people that were in the events. We'd just say, well, the revenue will come if you estimate properly. And the revenue will come if the prices allow for overhead recovery and profit. And the revenue will come if you start selling the services that you should be selling. And that was a little vague in itself. And so this LeanScaper 50-week program that we're putting people through helps people understand exactly how to do that. What are those leading indicators? What are those high value actions? What exactly do you need to do to set rules of engagement to grow profit? And so the improvement strategies that we're going to teach are going to really layer on top of what you come up with for your own initial assessment. And that's why this becomes a continuous improvement program. What you may identify right now is going to evolve. And so the key thing that we want to really stress here, what we're trying to create are goals for each quarter. We're not trying to create goals that are year long. Our year-long goal might be to grow by $1 million or $2 million or $10 million if you're a larger operation. But what we're really trying to do is say, what are we going to do in the next 90 days that will contribute to improving the business in these 5 categories? So we really want you to think about 90-day improvements. We don't want to always be thinking about the 1-year target. A revenue target is not a very good SMART goal. That is just simply a measurement. What we want to do is really get specific, and we want to figure out what is it that we're going to do in the next 30, 60, 90 days to improve in these areas. And so when you start to think about improvements, it's really important to think in terms of 90-day blocks. I think many people try to set year-long goals and they never become reality. It's just not tangible. And that's why SMART goals are so important, is we want to make them time-bound and we want to make them a little tighter timelines. We don't want to be always looking at a year, because that's where procrastination lives. In my experience, it's exactly where it lives, whether it's growing revenue or losing weight or improving productivity. Everything I've tried to improve over the years, when I shorten up the timeline and I create meaningful steps day by day, week by week, month by month, quarter by quarter, miraculously, the goal for that year just becomes reality. So when we're looking at growing revenue and profit, these are the key things that we know will really be the big drivers of revenue and profit. And again, the revenue goal is just a target. So what we're saying here is, do you really actually track job profitability using estimated versus actual hours? And the reason we want to do this is we want to figure out how long our crews are taking so that we're more accurate with estimating, and so that we can fill the voids. If we've got 3 crews that are incredibly strong at laying pavers and they always hit the hours, and we've got 2 other crews that aren't hitting the hours, all we need to do is figure out what good looks like with the best crews and duplicate that with the others. When we don't job cost, we don't know. So we look at pavers and we say we're making 8%, when really we've got a couple crews that might be making 18% and a couple crews that aren't making anything at all. And so we want to dive deep into these, and we're going to throughout the 50-week program, the accelerator program, to make sure that you optimize all of these points within these 5 sections. So that's just an example. We won't go quite that deep on all of them, or we'll run short on time. But when you think about these, think as strategically as possible. Like, does your pricing strategy truly reflect all of the value that you're delivering? You know, one thing I've really noticed over the years when I've been doing some advisory work is oftentimes people that have a lot of recurring maintenance have created their pricing year over year, and as they landed contracts, they sold it a certain way. And because they sold it that way, they're stuck on that, and they keep renewing the business that way. And oftentimes our pricing isn't really put together in a way where it explains our value very well, or where we're actually charging for the big value drivers. So, you know, the bronze, silver, gold packages, for example, those left a lot to the imagination on the owner's side. They're thinking they're getting more than they're actually getting. And I think it was always, you know, really difficult for the business owner as well, in the sense that the customer wants way more than they're paying for, but the package was so ambiguous that it kind of left that opportunity for misunderstanding to exist, where when we get really good at developing pricing strategies and written proposals that sell value, and then when we train salespeople to explain value very differently and then price the work with the value attached, people are willing to pay for it. And again, pricing and packaging, for me, I've seen that result in a 20 to 30% lift in revenue, and sometimes 3x, 4x, even 5x profitability. I've seen companies go from 2% to 10% profit just by sending out renewals differently, pricing their contracts differently, explaining the value drivers. And sure, you may lose a few customers along the way. Definitely, you're going to see some retention issues when you go out and reprice and package. But the upside is so much more compelling than that short-term pain of losing a few customers, that it becomes kind of a way of doing business. And then from that point forward, every job that you're pricing is price profitable. And I've seen companies turn themselves around just on this one line item after 30 years of just beating themselves up and working for free because they're afraid to change something that's right there in front of them. And so these assessments are really important to go through. And, going through it on your own and going through it with the people that work in your organization is powerful. But we're really here to challenge you to do this with one of our guides. Our guides are here to take you through this business assessment and actually point out some things like we're talking about here, deep diving these one or two, that might actually create a much bigger opportunity in your business than you think. And if you need some help with that, one of our advisors can help work through a pricing and packaging strategy before you go out with your renewals. And that could be the difference of $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 of new revenue, or maybe millions of new revenue and much, much higher profit. But again, getting that outside perspective, sometimes to look at what you're doing in a market where you can't just call up your competitor and say, hey, what are you doing? Because they're probably doing it wrong. In all honesty, the market leaders are best at deep diving revenue. And so we call that a revenue audit, and we're here to do those for our community. Again, we want to understand what services that actually make money and which ones don't, so that we can double down on doing more of the high profit, the high revenue per hour work, and less of the stuff that doesn't actually serve us. Knowing full well that we need to make money off of every service and getting the pricing and packaging right, because there's always a way to make money through efficiency and equipment and better planning.
One of the things I was going to harken back to from your conversation at the outset of this is really there's a couple of things. Pricing strategy. I'd love to do a whole webinar on this because there is so many things you can tweak, whether it's in maintenance, as you talked about, or even in design build. Lumping in high profit packages like irrigation, like lighting, with your maybe somewhat lower profitable packages like hardscaping, in a way that pushes the value and then gets both. And then to your point, it doesn't take much to get those profit margins up. The other thing I wanted to land here too is as you're going through these, and as our guides would go through these with you, is I think one of the things I learned most about our goal setting exercise is the difference between leading and lagging indicators. You were talking about it with revenue, and the difference between what a goal is. So revenue as a goal in itself is something that's lagging, right? At the end of the year, we'll figure out whether our revenue was on target, and then we'll know whether we did a good job or not. But that's not going to help us in the first 3 months. That's going to give us a very late thing. It doesn't actually tell us what to do. And to Mark's point earlier, tough to get people engaged in things like revenue growth when there's so many factors outside of their control and it's not actionable. So as we go through this, as well as you put your SMART goals, as you work through our guides, we're going to look at things like lagging indicators like revenue, or like the weight when you step on a scale, and then leading indicators. Leading indicators, if you want to use a simple analogy in weight loss, would be things like, I'm going to work out every week. That's a behavior. I'm going to spend 3 hours a week working out. That's a behavior that's going to get us to the weight. And it's really important that our goals have both. That's the magic in making goals work. We can set a weight goal. That's not going to work if we don't do anything else that's going to get us there. So it's having those both things. One, goals that drive the behaviors that get us there. And then two, metrics at the end of the game to tell us whether we did a good job or not, whether we're on track on it as we go.
Excellent. Why don't you roll through the people and skills
Yeah,
section.
for sure. So on the people and skills section, people, as Mark talked about earlier, are one of those bottlenecks where it's pretty easy to get caught up in revenue or profitability growth, but it's not maybe a problem as much as it is your people. It could be. And so focusing on the people, growing a company with good people, I mean, it just makes going to work every day a lot more fun. But it also is what separates great companies from good companies, and certainly from the latter. So we want to go through this one importantly, look at things like, do people have defined roles? And do they know what they're responsible for? Do they know what they're accountable for? Do they know what their goals are and how they can move those goals or how they participate in their goals? A great conversation. We talk about revenue, and like, sure, our crew lead's not going to have anything to do with pricing and packaging, but they sure might be able to tell you ways that we're doing extra work and not necessarily getting paid for it, ways that we bill stuff at a fixed rate, which we never seem to hit our hours targets on. And so it should be hourly. Like, we can get information from there, and it gives them a great opportunity to start thinking like entrepreneurs in the business, which kind of gets into part two. Our employees regularly participating in training and development programs. And that goes to skills training, but also should go to business training, and really should look at, like, it's cliche, but you really are a team, and you all depend so much on each other's performance in order to get better. And then when you get better, you really do succeed as a team. That's where you see wages grow and profitability grow, and you start to dominate your market, and you become a brand. So business comes in easier, and like, all those things are good. But the way we're going to get there is if we level everybody up simultaneously. And so we need to have that part in our business.
This one's a big one, and we will really deep dive this in the coming weeks in the people and skills sessions. So as we're really talking here, what we're trying to do is build depth in the business. Your leading indicator of success is the quality of your people. And so the pipeline of people that we have applying for jobs, the people that we decide to hire based on their growth mindset, and then what we actually do with those people with a growth mindset once they come in during onboarding, and then the continued employee development over time. All of these things are the leading indicators of revenue growth and profit. And most businesses hyper-fixate on sales. And the problem is you can go get the sales, but if you can't make those customers happy because you don't have the skills, and if you can't make yourself happy by making a profit, then you're really kind of taking 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. And what I always try to stress in any of the training that we provide, whether it's a budget or estimating, we have to be growing people to be able to execute on the promises we're making. And so that is leadership training, sales training, that's customer service training, that's skills training to go out and do the work. It's efficiency training. It's training in many, many different aspects. And really, that was one of the big reasons why LMN invested so heavily into Greenius, is because we really truly understood that when we started to invest really heavily into training our team at our own landscape company, we really started to see the flywheel effect take place. We started to see people taking things upon themselves. They understood the common language. Everybody understood what waste looked like because they took courses online when they were hired. They understood what the 5S system was and how that was our workplace organization system, so that everything had a place and we had tools and inventory organized. And they understood that we had quality control expectations from taking the skills courses. They understood how to safely use the equipment. They understood what our expectations were in terms of delivering on estimates, because we built courses that helped them understand that. And then we lived that every day. But I always try to say that, again, culture is the way it is, and the way it is the way the leader makes it. And when you deploy a continuous improvement program, what you're doing is you're actually hyper-focusing on growing people and skills in every area of the business. And so when you score yourself here, don't hold back, and really let your team that are going to take part in this be as honest as possible. Ask them, to be as truthful as they can be with their scores. And what I'll suggest is tell them not to put their name on this sheet of paper when they turn it in. Just let them fill it in and come up with the score, compile them all, and then talk about it together. But there's no names on these forms for a reason. We don't need to know who said what. We just need to know what group of people were polled or that took part in this assessment.
Yeah, super good idea. Step 3 is pretty basic. Employee retention is such an easy number to measure, like your number of hires per year, your number of record of employments, as we call them, that you issue a year, versus your total number of staff. Certainly saw our numbers drop over the years, and that's a good thing. Some turnover is perfectly healthy, right? You should probably have some. 3x turnover is definitely not healthy. And to Mark's point, it's just impossible to leverage systems and get consistent outputs when you're continuously bringing in new people into a thing, or it's just ridiculously inefficient. It's also speaking to you, right? If you've got high turnover, there's other things that are going on. People are coming in, they're getting frustrated, and they're leaving. And it could be frustrated with wages, but it's probably not. It's probably frustrated with, they hired at the wage. So it's probably frustrated with their manager, who they work with, your systems, their day-to-day life there. And these are all things that the things we're talking about here are going to make an impact on.
Particularly on people, the one thing I just want to reiterate is when you start to do this scoring, what you'll start to notice is if you don't have a really strong training and development program in place, the score will be the score. It's probably going to be a 0 or a 1 if you don't have anything. I've said this many times. It's very easy to change that. You can sign up for Greenius for $99 a month. For $120 a year, every employee has an employee training program immediately. And so a lot of things are just a decision. And I think people sit on these things far too long. If you score a 1 out of 5, a great place to start is just simply, I'm going to turn on Greenius tomorrow. That's $99 a month. And I'm going to spend $120 a year to show my employees that I love and care about them enough to put them on a training program so that they can get better. And just that in itself changes that score, right? We go from not having training to having training. And that might put you, Greenius on its own might put you at a 3 or a 4. And then you can layer in more training, whether it be equipment training from your equipment suppliers, or maybe it's a hardscape installation course, or maybe it's, a community college program, or a Dale Carnegie leadership training program, or a LeanScaper program. We've got all kinds of sales training and operational training programs that are going to be launching here in the spring for you to actually put your staff on really specific ongoing live training programs as well. And the team over at Greenius are investing very heavily into a lot of incredible irrigation training. There's lots of hardscape training initiatives. There's a lot of employee development initiatives happening. And I know that the Greenius team is continuing to layer on a lot of courses. And the best part is, with that big release that came out a few years back, you can build your own courses. And this way you can actually augment the library that Greenius has just by simply pointing and shooting with your phone and building your own onboarding courses. Or it could be maybe a fuel system, or it could be how you put your tools back in your trailer to keep your 5S system. But you can really kind of solve this problem fairly quickly with some good initiatives. And so when you come up with your improvement list to build your SMART goals using the system, keep that in mind. There's some quick wins to be had with Greenius in this area. The next big area, operational efficiency. Mike, why don't you go ahead? This was definitely a huge area of responsibility for Mike when he was director of operations in our landscape company. As he came in, the company was really scaling, and efficiency was becoming a problem, as was quality and cash flow and other areas. Mike really helped build the lean system that we deployed. And ultimately, that really became LMN in many ways. And that was why Mike was the chief technical officer. But Mike, why don't you kind of run down some of the things that we really looked at and the way that we looked at these as we sort of started to assess where we were at in those early days. I think it'll be really helpful for everybody here.
Yeah, for sure. So right back to the earliest day would be our job interview, right? Where sitting behind Mark on a bookshelf was the Toyota Way handbook, and I'd already bought and read that book in my own time. For I just had a passion for being efficient, and then talking about that and talking about the potential for that in different industries other than manufacturing. And so operational efficiency is just about doing things better with less, faster, but without sacrificing quality. And it certainly, or in fact, in many cases, enhances quality. You just make it hard to do the wrong thing. They talk about practice, the difference between professionals and amateurs. And amateur practices until they get it right, or professional practices until they just can't get it wrong. And that's more or less what operational efficiency is about. It's about building systems in your company that make it really difficult to get it wrong. Then you don't have to worry about having expert field people and all your staff. You have systems that take good people and make them great. And I think that's where we started our thing from. We were doubling in size a year. So we weren't going to always find great people. We were going to hang signs out sometimes because we needed you. What we needed, though, was a company that took good, hardworking people. You've talked a lot about them in your master plans from all different walks of life, really. And then we made them great people because they thrived in a system with leaders of their crews and leaders in their company that nurtured that in them as well. And so standard operating procedures is about measuring how well we've documented the task. Is it clear for everybody how we do things? And if it's not, well, how could we do better at that? Putting crew notes in your estimates in LMN was a good one for that, right? We made sure that, hey, this is how we lay a paver, and it's in everything. And lots of crews know how to lay pavers, but I've got a couple that don't. Snow was another huge one. Every site was finicky, right? And we didn't always know who was going to go to site that night. So how do we eliminate the problems of that? Site maps for everybody, standard operating procedures for every site. So that no matter who got called at what time in the morning to go fill in for this site, everybody knew what they were supposed to do, right? And things like the app presented it in a way that made it really hard to do it wrong. You had to be almost willfully doing it wrong to be able to say, I didn't know what to do. And so that's a great first step, and measuring your how far along the curve you think are on that. Once you get to that point of making it really hard to do wrong things, I think you're going to see, again, big gains in revenue and some of these other goals that we're talking about, as well as I think you'll see less turnover. People come in, they're happier, they know what they're supposed to do, they do it. There's no ambiguity, there's no helplessness. Scheduling and resource allocation is always a big one. I found that one of the toughest parts of the jobs. So if you score yourself low here and take solace in it, I think that's one of the most challenging things. We've got all kinds of variables there. But what are we doing for scheduling and resource allocation? Is it somebody making it up every morning based on the conversations that we're having? It's probably not good enough. So we look at things like equipment boards, pushing schedules out to crews, using the app to push schedules out to crews to make sure that we minimize any of those unnecessary delays and efficiencies. That also goes to, when we talk about resource allocation, scheduling materials, which you talk a lot about being a really underrated source of waste and inefficiency. The availability of materials at site right when we need them, not too early so they're cluttering site, not too late so the crew's doing busy work because they don't have the materials they needed that day, not taking a detour on the way to site there, but having that stuff scheduled and planned ahead of time so that it's right there when we need it. Makes a big difference. Go ahead.
No,
go ahead. Sorry, I was good. Number 3 is about regularly talking about and identifying waste. So when we look at things like, we talk about continuous improvement on these, having a continuous improvement board to track what things we're doing and where they are in the status, and sharing that board with people so that they understand, A, our suggestions are being heard, B, these things are important, and C, they'll be happier as we address these things, because these things are the things that are frustrating them every day, right? Whether it's
and creating a common language on that one is a really big game changer for us. What I really noticed is, before we started really using lean and really talking about the 9 types of waste and using the 5S system for workplace organization, we would talk about waste, but it was usually like almost in a complaints way. Like we were just almost whining about things that we just didn't fix. And we would, as an owner, it's embarrassing looking back, but I would complain about the crew supervisors stopping at landscape supplies 2 or 3 times a day, or leaving the site to go get materials that they had forgotten. But there was no real system in place prior to that for them to know what they needed for the entire project. They were kind of making it up on their own as they went. And so getting really good at estimating and creating job plans and getting that information into the Crew app really allowed them to then understand what they needed. So that was step one. But step two was them understanding how to identify waste, and then for us to be able to talk about it using a language that actually made sense. And so with Lean, you have the 9 types of waste. Those courses are built right into Greenius. And again, you can see how these things all kind of overlap. If you think about section 2 being growing people, if they're taking their Greenius training and they're learning how to identify the 9 types of waste, and they're learning what the 5S system is, and those courses are right there so you can deploy it in your entire company, then when you hold a continuous improvement meeting and you start to ask them to let you know where the waste is, they have the same view on waste as you do, because those 9 types of waste become the framework. And so when you think about scoring yourself here, I just want to challenge you, like, have you actually created a systematic way to identify waste and remove that waste? In other words, is there a common language, and are there meetings where you actually talk about waste and what you're going to do about it? And then is there a method of deploying a new standard operating procedure to change whatever it was that was not working in the past? And I really think that utilizing Greenius for the training and for the deployment of the new standard operating procedures is a fantastic way to do everything. Go ahead on the equipment.
Yeah, sure. I think the last two last two are fairly self-explanatory, as we've got 8 or 9 minutes left here. But we want to make sure equipment and labor are utilized efficiently, that we have the right equipment. These things are fairly standard. That could be a great conversation to have with crews. Do you have the right tools and equipment when you need them? What are we sharing? What's not available when you need it? Because those things make a big difference. And then the last one, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. Our teams participating in daily or weekly meetings, to your point, discussing improvements along the common language. Everybody shares this general knowledge of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then are we having those conversations on a regular basis so that we all feel empowered to suggest, make, and then sometimes take responsibility for those actual improvements. And that was a big part of it too, is literally giving staff the responsibility to make some of those improvements happen, like the parking lot you'd be talking about earlier.
So as you get into customer experience, again, we want to ask better questions. And so there's some statements here that are clear, and we want to get the scores from 1 to 5. But I also, I think it's important that we here today talk through this document so that as you talk through it with the people that you're going to involve in this assessment, they can sort of understand what you could be doing. Or when you sit down and see the scores aren't very good, that you sort of start to think about, hey, what improvements could we make, like the Greenius solution earlier, that are quick wins? What could we do in the next 90 days to just drive the best improvements possible in each of these categories that are going to have the highest return for the time that we're putting into it or the money that we're putting into it? And we want to do that in a prioritized way. And that's why we're suggesting that as you finish this survey, then you sit down, you come up with a list of improvements, and then you put that list of improvements into ChatGPT using the prompt that we gave you to help create better SMART goals for this next quarter or this next 3 months, so that you've got a really tight time-bound set of things that you're going to do in the first quarter, so that you accomplish those and you move on to more things. And really, continuous improvement is about creating shorter time frames with really defined improvements and then moving on to the next thing. The balanced scorecard that we use here at LeanScaper will ensure that you're on track and that you're monitoring the health of the business in all areas. These improvements are going to show up on the balanced scorecard. So again, on customer service, here what it is, we want to get feedback from customers. And so this is simple. Like, are you actually using customer surveys or not? And if you are, great. That doesn't make it a 5. Are you using that feedback to actually drive improvements? That makes it a 5. If you're taking your customers' feedback by using surveys, and then you're having continuous improvement meetings to create initiatives to drive improvements in the areas that they're identifying as a weakness, then you're a 5. And so it's really important that you approach this that way, because I think sometimes people check boxes and they'll say, well, yeah, we do customer surveys, so that's a 5. Well, doing the survey is only half the challenge, right? That doing something with the survey makes you a 5. Customer satisfaction's high. What does that rating look like, whether it's Google reviews or the results from these surveys? And what are you actually doing with that information? Again, what is it that we're going to do to get more reviews on Google or better reviews on Google, right? We want to create actions that drive results. And so don't score yourself a 5 just because the customer satisfaction's high. Score yourself a 5 because you're doing more things to continuously improve despite the fact that it's already high. We resolve customer complaints quickly and effectively. Are you logging them in the CRM? Are you setting to-dos? Is there somebody following up? Are you actually reviewing those each day? Is there somebody responsible for customer satisfaction? These are sub questions of these statements that I think are really important to be asking yourself. We have a structured process for upselling and cross-selling to clients. A structured process, sometimes people will rate themselves a 5, and as I get talking to them, they say, well, yeah, we have upsell, cross-sell, and we have an email campaign, but that in itself is not a 5. A 5 is there targets? Is there targets for every salesperson or every project manager or every department? Are we measuring to those on a weekly or monthly basis to make sure that we're actually getting our upsell, cross-sell? Or do we just wait till the end of the year to say, hey, we fell short on our cross-sell initiative? And when we create a budget, what we're trying to do when we create a budget is create something that allows us to break that down into bite-sized pieces and then measure. Now, that measurement is the LeanScaper Balanced Scorecard. We'll be diving deep into that in week 4 and really talking about how a lot of these initiatives that we're talking about here over week 1, 2, and 3 can become a reality by always going back to that balanced scorecard. So last week, we really wanted to kind of open up with a little bit of an overview on things. And this week we wanted to talk about SMART goals. And next week we really want to talk about time management. And like last week's meeting preparation, that is the overview, because meetings are where continuous improvement happen. Goals are where we decide what it is that we're going to fix. And then next week we're going to go deep into time management for managing a calendar and really getting good at eliminating and delegating and automating as much work as possible so that these quarterly improvement plans, these SMART goals, become a reality because of where we spend our time. So hopefully you can join us again next week to go a little bit deeper on what we're talking about here. Mike, I'll let you take over here on brand.
Yeah, sure. Just one thing that came up when you were talking there is as you're going through this with your group and you want to have your discussions, 2 great questions to ask yourselves as you're going through these. It's great to talk about the things you're doing well, but before you give yourself a 5, maybe ask yourself, number 1, what are our cross sells? If you can't answer that question, and that could be whatever we're talking about in here. If you can't answer that question, well, now you're a 4. And it may go down from that. Another question to be like, what could we do better? So even though, again, you might instinctually think, yeah, we're good at this, ask yourselves a couple of questions that might challenge that assumption, get some feedback, and then rate yourselves. I think you're going to find that lots of times, to your point, we're doing things, but are we doing them as well as we could? No. And that's the difference between a 3 and a 5. And there's nothing wrong with being a 3 right now, but certainly there's you're going to be doing a lot better if you set yourself a target of being a 5. Being the best brand in market is what it says it is, right? Being the leader, being the company that people look to in your market, which includes your competitors, as the gold standard. And that's who people want to do business with. You're accountable, you're professional, you look professional, all that. And you hire the best people, you attract the best people. And so as we go through some of the goals here, knowing whether your company has a clear and unique value proposition that differentiates us from your competitor. So to your point earlier, having a clear and unique value proposition, there's your 2 or 3. Is it Do you feel like it's a real differentiator when you say it? You know, can your salespeople say it with that confidence that really expresses that, no, we're different and I believe it and this is why, and it's really compelling? Well, now you're at 5, but make sure that's it. And if that's not there, we'll work on that in future ones as well. And there's lots of tools we can talk about as well there. Branding consistency is big. And not just consistency, but also branding, I'll call it timeliness. Some companies have been around for a long time and the brand is there. There's, is your branding consistent? Great. Is your brand refreshed and compelling now for today's modern customer? That's another question you should ask yourself as well. Number 3 came up above as well, but that strong online presence and having positive reviews and actively engaging users. So many people find things now through, say, Google. It's only going to get bigger, right? The tools like ChatGPT that we just used are going to find you the same way through your digital presence. And it's really going to be monumentally changing over the next 10 years, right? We don't even know today how much it's going to be different in 10 years. But the best way you can get in front of that is to make sure you've got your digital fingerprint out there as often as possible. And things like having that strong presence and having those positive reviews, arguably, you can't really do anything better in the short term to do that. And then last but not least, making sure your marketing efforts are generating leads and building brand awareness. And to your point again, asking yourself the question, well, then how many leads do we get and where are they coming from? And if we can't answer those questions, we're a 2 or a 3 instead of a 5.
So next steps, we want you to complete the assessment. We want you to definitely involve as many people as possible. Prioritize 2 to 3 improvements that you think would really drive improvement in the next 3 months. And then create the SMART goals using the framework that we shared earlier. ChatGPT is a fantastic tool. We use it all the time for creating our own goals. It's very, very personalized because you put your improvement ideas in and again, use that prompt that we suggested. It's going to help get you there a little bit closer. Then take that assessment back to us, reach out to us. We're going to book you in with Aaron Strait or Dave Ellis, our 2 guides, and they're going to take that self-assessment, make some suggestions. I'll tell you now, they're going to expect that you join the accelerator program to really deep dive this. This accelerator program is your continuous improvement program for the next 50 weeks. They're going to start there, but they're also going to help match you up with tools, resources, frameworks that we've helped or created to help you improve in each of those areas. But they're also going to help connect you up with advisors, whether it be sales and marketing, whether it be hiring a fractional CFO, or helping you create a better hiring and onboarding system. We have a team of advisors that we've assembled to really help drive these improvements forward, knowing that small businesses can't afford to resource everything in-house, and that often it makes sense to invest some extra money on a monthly basis over the course of a year to transition the company and really drive the improvements into some of these major areas. But what the guides are trained to do is help you prioritize the improvements, help you understand how to afford those improvements by working those into your budget, what's enough and what's maybe too much to take on at a time, so that we're actually just driving continuous improvement into the business in a way where it's more natural, and all the time saved each week from all the firefighting puts more time back into your day to just drive these initiatives, knowing that we can't fix everything overnight, but over the course of a year, we're going to drive some incredible improvements if we get methodical about doing it. So please feel free to reach out to the guides. They're here for you. They really are planning on helping take your assessment and sort of coach you through a bit of a continuous improvement strategy to help you prioritize some of the things you're doing in the business and get you on track to using this LeanScaper system to the best of our ability. So we'll take a few questions before we wrap up. But again, thanks for showing up this week. Next week, we're going to go deep into time management. I'm going to describe how to make time for these things, how to really get the most out of the continuous improvement program factoring in time management for the leader, the leadership team, and everybody in the company to really ensure that we create the time to actually make these things happen. Because I think all of us business owners feel the time constraint, and that's generally why we ignore the things that we know are holding us back. And so we're going to go deeply into that. We're going to talk about how to eliminate as much as we can, how to automate as much as we can, and most importantly, how to delegate all of these SMART goals and improvements throughout the organization so that you truly do build a continuous improvement mindset in the company, and therefore you've got a continuous improvement or a continuous learning culture. We'll take a few questions and see you next time. Not a lot of questions. Lots of thank yous. Well, you're welcome. Thank you.
So what we'll also do if those are on, and what we're going to do every week is take the questions that came up in the webinar that we did or didn't have time to get to. And we're going to answer them. We'll answer them in the community. So if you did ask a question and it's a little earlier than Mark and I have scrolled, rest assured, we're going to jump into that. We'll post in the community. We'll post our answer in the community, and if you're in the community, we'll even tag you on it for sure. And we'll start a conversation from there.
Yeah. One question that did pop up is, what was the chat prompt? You can download this form and today's presentation from the community. So everything that we show here each week, you can grab from the community. And I think you'll also get it on a follow-up email here. So just for attending these first few free sessions. So that prompt will come out to you word for word, and you can get it from there.
There's a LeanScaper Hub folder in the community, and that's where these first 3 webinars will be located. The rest of the ones will be in the Growth Accelerator folder for companies that are in that.
When you sign on to the Accelerator program, you get access to a very specific group in LeanScaper that you don't get access to when you're in the free community. And there's a lot more tools and resources that walk you through this 50-week continuous improvement program, along with a whole series of standard operating procedures that match up with each week's programming, so that as you leave these weeklies, you've got the turnkey tools, resources, systems, meeting frameworks, to do these with your team as well. But again, if you're part of the Accelerator program, the goal is that you take an hour out each week with your leadership team, with the key leaders in your business, and everybody comes to these meetings so that you don't have to repeat and reinvent the wheel. You just grab the tools and resources and put them into action. I'm not seeing any other questions, so I think we'll wrap up here. As always, you can hit us up on LinkedIn with direct messages, right in the community with messages. We're in there a couple times a day. Mike and I both have time set aside in our calendars to be in the community for 2 hours a day. So we're very active. If you've got questions, comments, we're in there very hands-on. Again, we've got an incredible team of guides and advisors who are also very active in the community. So ask your questions, get involved in the groups, get involved in the chats. And if you don't find what you're looking for in there, feel free to ask. We're uploading a ton of standard operating procedures and frameworks every week right now as we build out this platform, and we're happy to jump ahead if there's something that's not in there yet. Just let us know. But we're here for you, and we love hearing from you, so don't hold back. Again, thanks for joining, and we'll see you next week.